Dharmabytes is brought to you by Free Buddhist Audio, the Dharma for your life. Our work is funded entirely by donations from our generous listeners. If you would like to help us keep this free, make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. Thank you, and happy listening.
For your reflections on this, very inspiring, and the questions you offer to guide us in reflecting on our relationship to the earth and our responses to the ecological crisis that we're facing today. I'm going to lead a Karna Bhavana meditation for the natural world, and I think this builds nicely on your offering, Ganapeta, because you talked about sending metta to the earth and experiencing metta for the earth. And it's on that foundation of metta that karna or compassion can arise. And it's from that compassion, that sense of duty, responsibility to care for the earth can arise. And so that's really the focus of this meditation. How can you cultivate that compassion and give rise to that sense of skillful responsibility and response? So I'm going to do a lightly guided meditation to fit the time we have, but I'm going to walk you through the stages first after a few introductory remarks to set the stage. And I want to thank Shradavani for her help in inspiring and shaping this meditation. And as Shradavani and I were walking through these meditations, we took inspiration from Analayo. Analayo is a scholarly monk who has written many books on Buddhism. One of the most recent ones is Mindfully Facing Climate Change. And I met with him along with Sachida, and I was on a retreat with him a year ago. And he clearly is very passionate about the climate crisis. And as he said to us, the climate crisis is not just something you read about or hear about. It's really happening. And it's going to pay to stress, looking at the enormity of what we are facing. And it's our responsibility, also as Ganapeta was talking about, as Buddhists, to take care of nature as we take care of our own body, and to ground that response and our actions in compassion and ethics. So it's important to face the seriousness of the crisis without getting overwhelmed or getting too into what Ganapeta calls the eco-anxiety, and sliding into what Analayo describes as three typical responses of humans to climate change. And that is fear, anger, and resignation. And Analayo compares these reactions to the three mental poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion, which of course are the root causes of all unnecessary human suffering. Analayo says that fear and grief, or eco-anxiety, are not good motivators for sustained action. And if we act from fear and grief, chances are our actions may be causing more harm than benefit. Mindfulness is key, Analayo says, to facing what is difficult. And we need a very strong foundation of mindfulness and metta so that we can act out of compassion. And compassion, Analayo says, means wanting to do something to relieve the suffering of others. And so we're in this meditation really going to look at the suffering of nature, and out of that sort of deciding what we need to do to relieve that suffering. And he cautions us not to confuse it with empathy, because empathy is really taking on the suffering of others. And so if we just take on the suffering of others, because suffering on top of suffering doesn't lead to very skillful actions and often leads to burnout. In order to cultivate this compassion, Analayo says we need to come close to the suffering. And that's really what we're going to do in this meditation, is coming close to the death of the planet, the suffering of nature, in the same way that we might reflect on our own death, our own impermanence. Karna, or compassion, arises when metta meets suffering. And Analayo says this doesn't have to be depressing. It actually can be uplifting and energizing. So if we are willing to come close to this suffering, we can see what he calls this massive potential in doing so, in terms of being able to act skillfully out of this compassion. And it can be a turning point for us as Buddhists to raise our own awareness, and then also to contribute to raising the global level of awareness, so that we can find a way to live on this planet with nature instead of against it. The Karna Bhavana, in a way, is a way to create or to open a creative space for us to respond, and in a way that's appropriate for us, in a way that feels comfortable for us. And it doesn't have to be a big grand gesture, especially if we're just starting with this. He says, Analio says it can be as simple as asking ourselves, how can I help? How can I help?
We hope you enjoyed today's Dharmabite. Please help us keep this free. Make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. And thank you.